see someone's leaks. Any worries, Dan, that people might see your leaks, or it's worth it's worth the trade off?
It's worth it. Just worth it. Maybe get the reverse leak, right? People see that I've got something somewhere, and I just I flip it on them.
Nice.
Rock, paper, scissors.
So you fought this all out.
Exactly. This is all advertising.
Let me see. All right. I think we should be live. Let me check.
I think I heard my voice on stream, so I think we're there.
So that's good. There is some delay. I don't know why. Quite a bit of delay, actually. Probably like 10 seconds or so. But I mean, it shouldn't ruin the party. So how about we start off maybe a little bit introduction of yourself. I made a post a while back already on YouTube that I was looking for some people who would be interested in having their game reviewed live on YouTube. You were one of the guys who responded, wrote down your story to me. I thought it was interesting, so we started chatting, and here we are. So maybe you give the audience a little bit some info about yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, hi everybody. So my name is Daniel, DanC. I'm probably best known as Peaceful Journey over on Coin Poker, where I play currently full time, roughly 200 NL is my average stake. I played poker for about the last 10 years or so to some kind of serious degree. For the bulk of that time, I was working in the industry also, working for companies like Run It Once Poker. And yeah, ever since then, well, for the past year and a half or so, I've been a full-time poker player, so playing online, and yeah, just finding my feet, learning a lot, and yeah, doing my best to improve. And yeah, I'm originally from Scotland, but currently living in Brazil, and looking forward to getting into it.
All right, I think we're gonna have to do that again because I get comments in nobody hears you. So I'm checking here my settings. Let me fix that.
Okay.
Maybe they started hearing you at some point. If some people could confirm that. Better now. Okay, yeah. So okay now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So I know what the problem was then.
So they heard nothing of me, or should I do it again? Or
Yeah, no, now that should be good. So I think everyone can hear you. I think everyone can hear me. So let's do this again.
excellent.
Then,
All right. Okay.
how about you tell us a little bit something about yourself? This time with audio, so you know the audience can also listen.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, hi everybody. So my name is Dan. Go by DanC in these poker Discord worlds. Probably best known for playing as Peaceful Journey over on Coin Poker. It's where the bulk of my volume is, and yeah, I currently play 200 NL online. I've played for the best part of the last 10 years, and I'm currently 29 years old. For the bulk of the time when I've played poker, I've been a recreational player whilst working in the industry. I worked for Run It Once Poker for a good period of time, and yeah, for the past year or so, I've been playing full time, trying to make it as a professional player, and it's been up and down, and as we'll see. But yeah, I'm learning a lot and looking forward to seeing what we can discover here about my game.
All right. For the people that haven't noticed, it's hard because we've been pushing it. We brought out a new League Buster program, and step one in if you want to become a better poker player, in my opinion, is to become aware. Right? We talked about that last week in the live stream as well, and I think I said this in the post leading up to this as well. And that usually starts with analyzing your data because that's the best way to get feedback on what you're really doing. Right? Unbiased feedback. Many times in my poker career, I thought that I was doing something or thought that I was not doing something. And then I looked at data and it was completely, or at least I might do something, right? One hand stood out or another hand stood out. But if I looked at the frequency, I was just not reaching the frequency, or I was starting to do things that I actually was not aware of that I was starting to do. So becoming aware, right, of your tendencies, and from your tendencies seeing what are leaks and what are actual deviations that are actually making you money, right? A leak is not necessarily any deviation made from theory. So the step one in how to best improve as a poker player is to do like a database review, right? In our Leak Buster program, we have a tool which we'll get with the program. It's the Mechanics Leak Finder. I used to have this tool already exclusively in our CFP. Then in our Mechanics of Poker program, I've done database reviews, leak finding, stat checking, however you want to call it, for probably the last 10 years of my career. And that has evolved from, I think I showed you guys this last week, from writing notes, writing stuff down on a whiteboard or pen and paper, to what we have nowadays, right? In the past also we didn't have GTO benchmarks available across the tree. Nowadays we have, so we have a lot more clarity and we kind of know what's quote correct. So yeah, today I will walk through the leak finder tab by tab, and I will kind of show you guys how to go about leak finding and doing a database review. And this is also kind of what the program is about, right? It's about teaching you how to do it, giving you the tools, and then teaching you how to best work with data. So it's not like, here's a tool, good luck, because I think a lot of mistakes actually are made. It's a powerful tool, but in the wrong hands, I think it can do a lot of harm as well. So the education around working with data and how to leak find, and then obviously after you found the leaks, now what, right? I chatted already a little bit with Dan prior going in, okay, these are kind of your main leaks that I found. Now what? Right? And the now what is usually then what's missing. And that's what I've been trying to focus on with this program. Like I said, I wanted to bring a program that was different than others. There's plenty of programs like this, like stat checking, leak finding type of hand to node stat packages. I think we did a better job, right? It's way more complete. But obviously we help you after you found your leaks as well. Any questions in the meantime? I will keep an eye on the chat. I believe my partner in crime, Dan, is somewhere around here as well to answer some of your questions. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. You excited, Dan? You curious?
Buzzing, mate. Let's go.
All right. So we start at the start, the general overview where we just see your win rate. Also based on 700, 5 to 600, 3 to 400. We see that you've done a decent amount of battles, doing well there. This brown number that you see is the average number of population. So on average, the population loses when they're rec battling. You seem to be doing well. This is actually something that's very present in my game usually as well. It's just when I battle, I'm way more engaged, way more focused, and I usually play well. So it's not necessarily that my opponents are worse. They're actually better, but I play better as well. It's actually something that I explain in the program as well, that, the reason why you might do something might not even be a technical mistake. It might be a focus and engagement mistake, right? And that's why it's very important to diagnose correctly. So if we look at this tab, this is just very basic, some win rates. The first thing that I noticed actually in your game is this one. If we look at the win rates per position, I think we're working with like 150k hands, right? Yeah, here on the right top, 150k hands. This is your win rate. This is the win rate of bots. Now taking consideration these bots, they have a win rate of 0 in the end, right? Because they're playing against bots and they don't pay any rake. So ideally, we would outperform the bots, right? And the win rates behind that are the win rates of an average population. So obviously, we would that's kind of more of maybe a real benchmark in terms of, okay, what win rates can I expect on average for a human being playing in these games? And then the one thing that I straight away noticed was the big blind, minus 48. In the other areas, you perform the same or even better. So like EPMP cutoff, it's mainly in the blinds where at first glance, right, if we just look purely at the win rate, that's kind of where there's room for improvement. Now, this is very important when you do database analysis, that you don't go blind on one stat. Now, some people might look, win rate is not reliable, 150k hands. I completely agree. But it's one piece of information. That's usually how I like to do database reviews. This is something that I'll now note down. Okay, at the first layer that we start gathering information about your game, we've identified that your big blind win rate is quite low. Okay, let's keep that in mind. Let's note that somewhere and let's continue gathering evidence, right? And as you will later see, if we go through the tabs, that this point will every time come back. And this is very important to help identify where exactly something is going wrong, right? So for now, that's basically the most important thing that I want to get from this tab. Like I said, you can just get some general information, win rate information. Obviously, you need huge samples for just this individual stat to be accurate, right? In the short term, it can also serve more as like variance indicators, especially stuff like facing a 3-bet. So for example, here versus 3-bet. So this is in general when you face a 3-bet. You seem to be losing more than you should. But obviously just this alone is not really going to say much. Here we can see like versus the open. So let's say you're in the big blind and you face an open. We see that when you call, you lose twice as what you're supposed to lose. So based on just this sheet, we could say that, okay, defending from the big blind is probably going to be a problem area for you. Purely based on this first sheet, right? And we're going to gather information later on and then see if that's true or if that's false, or if we have to kind of retest this observation. So if we can then go to the next tab, is sub games. There we can just see your win rates across all spots. And if we straight away look at, for example, out of position pre-flop caller, single raise spot, so that would be, for example, big blind defense, we can indeed see you're winning at you're losing at minus 108, whereas GTO would be minus 45, but obviously they pay no rake, right? If you defend the big blind, you will pay some rake. And population is minus 58. So this is definitely an area of attention. And the same in position pre-flop caller big blind. You're losing at minus 81, where you should be minus 15 or minus 44. So this kind of confirms again that the big blind is probably where it needs some attention. Especially when we now work with 150k hand sample and we go towards 3-bet, 4-bet pots. Win rate stats are not going to be very accurate. However, they can still be useful, right? Also, if we look at the next step, which is going to be about variance, in the short-term sample, it can give you a good indication of how hot you've been running. It's like one of the most important things in poker is consistency, right? The person who shows up consistently is in the end who's going to be the biggest winner, right? And something that throws people off is because they go with the ups and downs. So in my experience, I started to do this in my CFP as well, give people like variance reports, basically how hot they've been running. So this way, when people were doing very well, they would kind of, keep their ego in check. And when people were doing very bad, we could see that, hey, listen, this is a lot of variance. So for you, for example, it shows in position pre-flop caller in a 3-bet pot, you're losing at minus 283. It's like roughly three times what an average population would do. Now, could it be that, you're not playing that spot perfectly? Sure. But are you going to lose 3 times as much? Yeah, unlikely, right? Are you really 3 times worse than the population? And especially 3-bet pots, 4-bet pots over a small-ish sample, 150k hands, maybe not the smallest, but it can definitely give you a good indicator of like, okay, in 3-bet pots, as we can see here, you've not been running great, right? All these numbers, both in PFR and PFOP caller, you're not really doing great. Now, behind that, we can look at more like how things are played. But so far, this is kind of the big blind is what I take out of this, right? That's kind of confirming. And that in 3-bet pots so far, you've not been running great. In 4-bet pots, however, you seem to be outperforming. So that kind of compensates a little bit for it. Then moving on to variance tab. And after that, that's kind of the wrapping up, like kind of the win rate part. And then I quickly want to reflect with you, Dan, see if you have anything to add to that. Again, continuing on like the variance, I think it's very important, even like, for example, monthly to check in. Like, okay, I think it's very nice if you have a diagnose, right? If you're losing, you kind of want to know why. Or if you're winning, you want to know maybe a little bit less, but it's good to know why, right? Have you just been playing well or have you just been running good? Chances are usually when things are going badly, right? Way worse than normal. There is some bad run involved, and the same if you're running better than normal, there's some good run involved. So, for example, at pre-flop all-ins, usually if you would go mine hands over, let's say, the last 6 months of last year, and you gather all the biggest winners, and you look at their pre-flop all-in win rate, I can tell you it's usually 3x of what it's supposed to be. So all the biggest winners over a small sample usually run very well in pre-flop all-ins. So this is again like to keep your confidence a bit in check, to keep your ego a bit in check. Sure, you're playing better, but also, stay realistic. Okay, well, my win rate all in, for example, is 3x of what it should be. Your win rate all in seems to be fine. Nothing like if you look at GTO 1.1, pool 550, taking consideration because all in big pots, they don't have to pay rake. So you probably want to land somewhere in the middle. It seems like, that's fine. Nothing too crazy here. And here we can actually see how often you made certain hands over a short term, over this period of time, especially when it becomes a shorter period of time. So let's say things have not been going well for like a month or a couple weeks. It's very good to check. So actually over the sample of 150k hands, you got dealt ace, king, and queens a bit less than you should. And guess what, guys? Almost all of your winnings in poker come from ace, king plus and queens plus. It's less sexy than it sounds, but this is a very big part of your winnings. So let's say, for example, over a 2-week period, things have not really been going your way, and you see, hey, I've not got dealt premiums, and when I got dealt them, my $1 showdown was way lower, or I did not get them in pre-flop. That's actually it can give you like some peace of mind, and from a state of peace of mind, it's easier to play good poker. So this is kind of like I kind of designed this tab because I noticed that it has a very big impact on your performance. If we look at how often you flop the set, that seems to be fine. Turn set, you actually turn them a little bit more often. Your rivet sets a little bit less often. However, if we look at your $1 at showdown and your win rate is a little bit lower of what it should be. And actually, we can see that at your $1 at showdown, compared to GTO, you're winning at showdown definitely less than what it should be. So this is also like an indicator of variance. Yes, you made your sets, but did you now also win it, right? Or did you end up losing? And based on the $1 showdown here and what it should be, you should be winning your sets at showdown more often. Could also be, for example, that you didn't make the correct hero folds, etc. But for the most part, this is just an indicator of variance. You made your sets, but you were not able to how can I say, kind of collect the winnings, because when you had to turn over your cards, you lost, right? And this kind of basically goes for all hand classes. One thing actually that I also wanted to point out that was a clear indicator of variance in your game is this is if you've 3-betted or 4-betted, then how often, if you have 10s to kings, how often you actually flop an overpair. This is actually, especially in the short term, it's a huge indicator of variance. Let's say you 3-bet pocket queens 3 times in a row, and every time the flop is ace high. That's gonna hurt your win rate over a short sample. Whereas if every time the flop was 10 high, man, you might win 3 stacks more over a 10k hand sample, right? So that's actually a huge indicator of variance. And for you, actually, we can see that you're supposed to flop an overpair with this hand around 50% of the time. You're only at 44k, so you saw an overcard a bit more often in 3 and 4-bet pots. Your win rate is way lower. Your $1 showdown is way lower. Which means that again, when the cards went open, you lost. So probably you got coolered here. And then on the turn, how often it remained an overpair, way less as well, 43% instead of 56%. So you were not able to, and that's also probably where this win rate comes from, right? Half of the win rate what it should to be in a very important spot to make money in poker. So this is a great indicator of variance. You run quite bad in 3 and 4-bet pot with your overpairs. So if you really have something to complain about, you can say, hey, I'm not just whining, it's the data that can back this up. So that's kind of it from like a win rate and variance perspective. Anything you would like to add or any comment you have so far?
Yeah, no, it's cool to see. I think every poker player, we sort of feel like we're running bad, to a
Yes,
certain
exactly.
degree. But when I think back over this year, there's been periods up and down, but oftentimes we only really pay attention to the all-in EV and the difference we are from that number. And it's important to realize that that's not the only place that variance comes from. And I think about there was a period June, July where I was doing quite well, and then August where I got destroyed. And I think the period in June, July, I think I was quite under EV, and then August I was actually over EV despite getting destroyed. So I would guess I'd ran pretty average-ish in this sample. I'm not gonna. It looks like I might be a little bit more unlucky than what I thought, but at the end of the day, with the way that I'm playing, I'm sure I'm making mistakes all over the place. I'm leaving money on the table. Where if I was playing optimally or the best win rate poker that was possible to be played in my pools, I would be crushing the game. So I'm not going to use these variance numbers as an excuse, but it's obviously very good to dive in and give a little bit of a reality check to the sample.
Yeah, and especially like you said, in that 1 month that things were going way worse, it's very nice to have a diagnose so it doesn't influence your game as much, right? Obviously, we try to focus on the controllable variance, like you said, right? You try to just play good poker, but it's very easy for doubt to start creeping in if you start losing over a longer period of time. And what I've found from like a mental game performance perspective, having like this data that can show you what's actually going wrong. Or, you might actually be losing and you look at this data and it's like, fuck, I'm actually running hot as well, right? This was actually like when I was playing this Cash Game World Championship. I talked about that last week here on stream. At some point also I was looking at, it's not going so well over this week. But I've actually been running hot, so maybe I should, I cannot blame it on that. So I have to really, really, really zone in. So from that perspective, actually, it can also really work. So yeah, that's kind of it for like the first and how I like to use win rates. Now I know a lot of people, they don't like to work with win rates because of the variance, but I hope I kind of showed that it's just one piece of the puzzle, and it's actually a great indicator for variance in some cases. So yeah, moving on to like the other two overview tabs, which you could see more as like a HUD, right? Just a very broad overview of your game, and then mainly around, as you can see here, the range construction and like c-bet versus c-bet. So basically mainly how you construct your ranges from like the most global perspective we can look at it, right? From the top down. So the first thing that I noticed when I was looking at this tab is 54-1 was a flop. So you're definitely fighting. But if we then looked at your red line and blue line, like your red line was not necessarily going through the roof, which people would often associate with 54-1 as a flop, right? So that's something to pay attention to. And then if your red line is not going high, your blue line should make up for it. But that was actually also stagnating. So you didn't have, like some players have like a clear blue line or clear red line problem. With you, that was not really the case because both lines, they kind of ended up breaking even. And so you ended up breaking even, right? So it seems to be that you might, usually this for me is an indicator that it's more of a blue line problem. I think that's where you can make most money, that you're now winning pots, especially with your stronger hands that are going to be less than what they should be. But we will get to that later on as well. Especially, for example, if you look at your aggression here on the river, in general, you seem to be a little bit over aggressive, especially on the river. That means that you're not trapping enough, which is actually going to be something that I want to dive into. So if we now look at your range construction, on flop, actually looks pretty well in terms of how often you bet with strong, how often you bet with weak. So this is kind of just flop, c-bet, or flop balancing. We see nothing like out of the ordinary per se, where later I will get to that in a second. If you see things coloring green, that means that you're more on the passive side. If it turns red, you're more on the aggressive side. The reason I use green kind of comes from my philosophy that I usually use this in a HUD, and I also always saw green as this gives you the green light, or this gives me the green light. And also I know that many players might use blue. It's also perfectly fine, but that would say that blue line is associated with passive play and red line is associated with aggressive play, and that I just don't think is true. As just to say, in certain areas that's true, but I don't think as a whole that's true. For example, you're super aggressive, but you are not winning at red line, right? So if that statement would be true alone, then your red line should go to the roof. My red line should also go to the roof, but it doesn't. Something actually I want to focus on quickly on the flop before we go to the turn. I will pick something from the flop, some of the turners on the river, is your range construction in raising. If we can look at your flop raise range, it's 50% strong, where it should be only 36% strong. And it should be 57% weak, and you're only 47% weak. So that means that you're fast playing a lot of your value. That's one. And you're not including anywhere near enough bluffs, both in position and out position. As you can see, these numbers are huge deviations. Like I said, 49 to 36, 46 to 37, 50 to 36. These are huge gaps, like 14%, 15% gaps from theory. So, for example, we could take a look at this tab, single raise pot out position preflop caller. So this is when you're in the big blind, right? Which was kind of the first suspicion that there could be something wrong here. We can indeed see, again, this win rate minus 108 instead of basically you're losing twice as what you should. And then if we go to lines, we can indeed see that your check raising here is 12% and it should be 14%. So you're lacking check raises here. Where actually we can see that, especially versus 1/3 sizings, you're getting 6% more success with your check raises. So this is just direct feedback on how often something is working in your game. So obviously we could look at, oh, let's look at population tendencies. Do they overfold to check raise? Obviously great to look at, but this then gives the feedback, how is my strategy working in game, right? Which is often missing. I hear many people say that like, oh yeah, I look at the data, but I don't know if it's working versus me. Well, here now you get feedback basically with the success numbers. And if we look at the range construction, because then the first thing is, okay, I'm under check raising. Well, then where does this come from? Therefore, we have, and then normally you would, for example, click check raise, and then you could see the range construction here on the right? But then we have no benchmarks. So what is the correct number? Yeah, I can see that I'm check raising low pair 4% of the time, but is that correct? Is that more? That's why we also added it here, and then we can add benchmark next to it. So as you can see here, 2 pair plus, you're check raising 70%, 69, roughly 70% of the time. It should be 52, which kind of confirms that you're not slow playing enough. Now, in this situation, it's not necessarily, I would say, a big problem. But for example, I will get to the 3-bet pot tap in a second as well, where the SPR is lower. There it would indeed be more of a problem. Whereas if we look at air, pure air, you're only check raising half of the pure air of what you should. Whereas if we look at the success number, especially versus 1/3, you're getting 6% overfolds. So, and actually the times that you did do it with your air, this 45, should be 35, you're getting 10% more success. So this is like a deviation from theory. You're doing something less than theory. Then the next question is, well, is this deviation on purpose? Let's say, for example, you've identified that people underfold to check raise. That would be a good reason not to do it. But we can see here actually that when you check raise, it's actually working. And on average, versus the population, especially at like lower stakes, especially versus a 1/3 c-bet, you're going to get overfold. So actually, your deviation is not playing in the weakness of the pool. It's actually doing the opposite. So you actually want to check raise way more air, right? And then way more also, for example, here with low pairs, we see at 5 instead of 8. Draws, we said 23 of 29. So across the board, you're missing bluffs in your flop check raising game. Does that make sense? Do you say like, hey, this is definitely something that I've identified as well, or what's kind of maybe also your thoughts behind not slow playing enough or fast playing more value in general?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that when I look at my game, I've noticed myself I have a little bit of a lesser understanding of big blind play, especially as the out of position caller. Whereas I think it's easier to study, it's nicer to study your c-bet strategy, but when you're in the big blinds, it sometimes gets a little bit fuzzier, a little bit more complicated. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, that we see that I'm leaking there. And then yeah, when the pool, from just my experience, and I'm sure you can see the data as well, people do tend to just default to these small range c-bet sizes a lot, right? And it makes a lot of sense that we need to be attacking those. And yeah, the fact that I'm not, this is going to be like a very quick, easy win to throw into my game to be able to gain some more win rate there. As for trapping, yeah, I think definitely, especially as they're out of position, there's a natural fear that you don't want them to go bet flop, check back turn, and you're sitting there with top set, and there's whatever 7 big blinds in the pot. It's not so there's an urge to raise, and as you say, it might not necessarily be bad if people are calling too much or whatever. But yeah, I think being a little bit trickier and a little bit more willing to mix it up in the big blinds definitely looks like a good adjustment for me. And
yeah, actually, you mentioned something. You mentioned the tendency of pool vote, right? That's very easy to just press that 1/3 button, and you can actually see that in your success as well when you check raise. If you start check raising versus bigger sizings, you can see the success kind of plummeting, right? 37, 32. Because basically, when people start to see bet for half pot or 3/4, you tend to usually see that is a little bit stronger, which means that actually we want the kind of. Actually, I can see your fold numbers. You're actually under check folding to like this bigger c-bets and still check raising quite a lot. That is mostly value though, so that's fine. But so it's the bluffs mainly that you should probably add versus the 1/3, right? And I would say that you could probably even find some more folds versus bigger c-bet sizings. Actually, this is something that we can actually see here at at our flop defense, just in general overview. We can see here how often you face a certain sizing. Let me see if that's a general trend. No, okay, you do seem to adjust versus bigger sizing. But we can see here as well the success percentage from raising versus smaller sizing compared to a bigger. That's usually you will see that that's going to be less. So something to point out on. One thing actually I wanted to add is, let's say, for example, in terms of the slow playing, let's say we go to 3-bet pots and we look at, for example, your raise strategy. No, 3-bet pots in position preflop caller. We can see here that, for example, your flop raise strategy, where are we here? Raise. It's again, you're raising, for example, 2-pair plus, double the amount of the time. And especially I saw like some hands here, let's say you have a set, let's say, for example, something like this. Like in a low SPR dry board, there's just not a lot of reason to start raising straight away with strong hands. So like in single raise pots, obviously we want to check raise to get more money in. But especially in 3-bet pots, there's way less of a need to do a lot of fast playing. So that's definitely something, a point of attention that I would, same here with, for example, this queen 7 that I'm seeing here. Yeah, just let him let him do his thing, right? Like especially when you're in position, so he can just check towards you. You can still build a pot. So that's definitely an area that I would say, okay, be careful then. And then maybe another point. Actually, I didn't see if that's true. But if we go to your flop check raise and let's say 2-pair plus, I know people cannot see now the hand. I will have to point it out. But maybe there's like certain hands. For example, actually something like this. It's very dry as well. Where is it? You know, I wouldn't mind letting someone catch up here a little bit. And then either go for a turn check raise or river check raise versus bet check bet, something along those lines. And I'm trying to see if maybe you're check raising. This is maybe not the best example. But on boards like this, like very connected boards, for example, a hand like Jack 8 or something, that is sort of strong, but it's not really strong, right? So, for example, I would much rather check raise Queen 10 here or Queen 9 than a hand like Jack 8. So I don't know if that's the case. Like this is just a random hand. I just saw the texture. But then that's something, if the board is either super dry, like the A7-3, I wouldn't mind slow playing. And I wouldn't even call it slow playing, but it's more that I wouldn't check raise a bad 2-pair on a very wet board, for example.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, especially on the dry boards where you have the set or you have the top 2-pair, it's like there's not a turn that I'm scared of, right? So
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense in that situation to go a little bit slower. And then yeah, this Queen Jack 8 example, it was your Jack 8 is on a lot of turns and rivers is going to not be something that you're going to want to put your stack in with. So it would make more sense, maybe raise, either like a queen that's got some like a king queen type of hand that's going to perhaps there's not, if the overcard comes, it actually improves the hand, or if the 10 comes, it actually gives you a straight draw or something. Like your equity is a little bit more robust in that scenario.
Yeah, so it's kind of the relative versus absolute strength that if you have the tendency to just fast play a lot, maybe you kind of consider a 2-pair there a strong board, a strong hand. So then if we look at the turn, there's actually like the turn check, the raising game here on the turn is actually the same point as on the flop. But I mainly actually wanted to now zoom in on the turn. So we can see your betting range is way too strong. So again, like if you look at how often that's strong, it's 55 instead of 42. And how often it's weak, it's only 35 instead of 50. So you're, again, missing bluffs on the turn by a lot, 15%, and you're betting way too much strong hands on the turn. Now, again, like the definition of strong here is important. So let's say, for example, we go to single raise pots in position PFR, lines, and we go to turn C betting. We see that in general, you do little turn C betting, and there again, we can see that 2-pair plus, but most importantly, and that's actually the one that I think is the leak, is top pair over pair. So usually like one street value type of hands that people like to play bet check way too often, kind of to avoid a river decision. That's usually kind of what's going on, right? 2-pair plus, again, that could be that you're not really understanding like the relative versus absolute hand strength. You're not spotting that. So again, like the queen jack 8, that a hand like queen 10 would, for example, always be a barrel, and a hand like jack 8 could, for example, be a check. So that's more like what I would say in the 2-pair region. Normally in position in this spot, we don't really do slow playing in terms of actual slow playing, right? If we slow play a hand like 2-pair, it's just because it's a relatively weak hand compared to how wet the board is. But for example, if we look at, so we look at bet, and we look at, let's say, for example, a middle pair. That's maybe a good example. Let's say this hand. I think this is probably a good example. We open tens, we get a call in the big blind. Flop comes jack 6-5. We see bet 1/3. Villain calls, and the turn is a 5, and he doesn't lead. This, what's kind of your thought process here in terms of coming to a turn barrel conclusion?
Yeah, well, first off, I probably nowadays would play this board a little bit more polar and would check back more often on the flop. But I think as played on this turn, yeah, at these stakes, there are still a lot of players that just don't play donks. So therefore, they're going to be a little bit maybe stronger than they should be on this turn, because I imagine Solver is supposed to play a lot of donks. But yeah, I think now I'd be more inclined to go a little bit mergier and do a higher frequency, like third pot sort of size. Whereas I think for most of this sample, I was leaning towards thinking, okay, I'm going to overbet on the turn a lot, so therefore I'm checking my middling sort of hands. But yeah, as played, I feel like this is one that you could probably go either way. My instinct right now, as I look at it, is to check. But yeah, it's I can see arguments for both, right? Because on this board, you're going to have the big blind's going to have a 6. They're going to have hands like pocket 7s, pocket 8s, even pocket 4s, ace highs that are going to be able to be put in a tough spot against a smaller barrel. So yeah, I think with this, I think you could probably bet this hand, but I don't think I could do it for this size. It seems a little bit weird to me looking at it now. But
I think actually sizing wise, I would probably just play this size, just top of my head.
Yeah.
I would think that, for example, a hand like 7s, for example, getting value of a 6. I think like 7s and 10s is a very big difference here. 7s, for example, the folding range will have more equity versus 7. Think of a hand like ace 9. If you have 10s, you don't mind keeping ace 9 in. River is a 9. You can actually, maybe he blocks, you can make a small raise, or he checks, you can make a nice bet check bet. Obviously, when you have 7s, you prefer ace 9 to fold. Also, if this hand goes check check and he bets the river, a lot of his bluffs are going to come from hands like 7-8, 7-9. So you're not blocking any of the bluffs. But in general, to kind of betting too much 2-street hands on the turn, that seems to be like kind of the main leak, I would say. And this is kind of where you're lacking blue line. You're putting a hand that's supposed to make his money from blue line, from checking back, letting villain catch up with ace 9, or letting him bluff with 7-9. You're putting that hand into a red line strategy, right? Whereas this is clearly a blue line type of situation. Same with this hand, for example, that I saw here. 9-6 on quite a coordinated board. I would say actually flop is... actually, maybe this guy's a recreational, I don't know. But this is quite thin already. We're gonna get called by hands that have a lot of equity or that already have us beat, right? Jack 6, King 6, Ace 6, you name it. So yeah, these are like just randomly 2 hands that I saw here in the database. What's this?
Yeah, you see a lot of people in the world, they check or they miss a bet because they're scared. This is like betting because I'm scared.
Yeah, exactly. And scared of what's supposed to come on the river, right? At least if you now just bet 10s again in the turn. Actually, this is kind of that example with 7s that I kind of gave earlier, but here the position is a bit tighter. So 7, he has now more 8s, 9s himself compared to bottom versus big blind. So I would again say that this is probably just a check in these positions and let him bluff the river. So this is where this will be a node where I think you can definitely increase your blue line. Then, for example, turn. If we go to, for example, another node that actually not not trapping is actually a problem, is, for example, yeah, let's go again to the big blind defense, right? As we kind of concluded that that's probably where the issue is. This one. So flop goes check, check, and you have the opportunity to probe the turn. We see that you're at 87. Your 2 pair plus bets 87% of the time, where it should only bet 62% of the time. So again, way too much betting yourself with 2 pair plus, and especially when you're out of position in the big blind on as well turn or river, you can actually often make way more money by check raising your top of range than betting them out to self. So here, for example, top pair over pair, like the 52 versus 45, this is perfect. Like a 1 pair hand, you kind of want to just put the money in yourself. Your hand is not strong enough to check raise. But the 2 pair plus region, so like your very strong hands, they can often make way more money by taking an alternative line than just betting themselves. So in this case, that would be check raising versus delay. Or let's say we go, and let me see the line, check call, check, check call, check raise, for example. That would be a good one. Check call, check bet. We can indeed see that 2 pair plus. Actually here, so far, 72, a little bit too often. But the general trend would be the same. Like, okay, I have top of range. How can I get the most amount of money in? When we're out of position, that could actually also be check raising. Same as, for example, if we are the PFR, let's say small bet versus big blind, and we look at your flop turn check raise strategy, it's basically non-existent. So you see bet flop check turn, and we can indeed see a barreling again 82 2 pair plus instead of 64. So a lot of hands that, for example, see bet flop, and that we, I don't know if you do a lot of overbetting here. Okay, you do a reasonable amount of overbetting. I personally don't really do a lot of overbetting small bet first big blind, and kind of the hands that overbet, I move to a check raise actually myself. So I kind of bet more closer to like 3/4 of pot, and when my hand actually wants to go bigger, I actually move that hand to a check raise. That's actually going to be way more efficient. You can get way more money in the pot than an overbet yourself, if that makes sense. So these are like some spots where you're kind of, I don't want to necessarily say misplaying, but it's kind of a suboptimal way. You think strong hand, let put money in the pot, but you can actually get more money in the pot by checking, either on the turn or on the river. And then, especially on the river, you can sometimes check jam a hand that you would otherwise just overbet yourself, and that actually loses a lot of money. I know that usually actually a lot of focus in poker goes to hero call spots, bluff spots, all this kind of thing, but misplaying your value in terms of not getting the most out of your value hands, this is actually huge in terms of, if I would say, leaks. Finding it's also a bit harder to detect. Now with this range construction breakdown, it's a bit easier already. But these are definitely spots where you can make a lot more money with the top of your range. And this is also, we saw your blue line not really picking up. It's for that reason. But in the same time, we did see that people, we do actually see that people do a lot of overfolding on turns, right? So your betting range was too strong and not weak enough. Whereas if we go to turn on average, when you bet, you can see that you're betting 35% on average on the turn, which is normal compared to GTO. But your success is 49 with your bets, right? It should be 41. So this is a general trend of just massive overfolding of the pool. And what you're doing, actually, you're creating a betting range that's way too strong. Okay, so it's actually, again, it doesn't play in the weakness of the pool, it's the opposite. The pool kind of exploits you naturally, which is usually the worst thing that kind of can happen. So that's definitely something to point out on. Like, one note, if we go back to your big blind game, right, that was very kind of, I think, what's going to be most important. That stabbing strategy. You can also see this if you do MDA of like low stakes. Usually the check back range is too weak, and therefore people overfold to probes. Feedback in your game specifically, you're getting 48% success with your turn probe, or it should be 35. So you're getting 13% overfold with the stab, and you're under stabbing with air, 28 versus 34. So again, like, definitely a point of intention. So slow play more the top of your range and bet more air, and then naturally, actually, you'll range, right? If we, how we started here, right, where we went to just to like the overview and we saw this range breakdown, you want to get this closer to GTO numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It strikes me as another, like, fear sort of thing, right? You're out of position and you're in the turn with a good hand. It's like there's an urge you to bet because you don't want it to go check and you've got a good hand and the river is you're in a small pot. But in reality, in that spot, people do tend to just stab quite often, right? If you check to them or if you've shown weakness, people tend to stab, and then you've got a check raise opportunity and you actually get more money in the pot. So
yeah, that's the thing, right? Because yes, sure, you're gonna miss it more often than if you bet yourself, but the times that you hit it, you can make 3 times more money.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So that's kind of the correction there. Let me see. Then I had one point to add here on the river. And this, I think, is another very big issue in your game. River hero calling. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Usually when I say this, people know. People know that they have a problem. And
yes,
that's the fascinating thing, right? A lot of people out here, maybe also now listening, they know they have a problem. You know, they make the bluff when they know they shouldn't make the bluff. They make the call when they know they shouldn't make the call, right? And we can do a database review here, and it doesn't fix the problem. That's also why in the program, right, we've identified that you're in the camp. I tend to be too sticky on the river. Why is that, and how do we fix it, right? That's something that just hand to note will not show you. So that's kind of what I go deeper into in the leak buster, right? This is just the analyze phase, and after that, I think we talked briefly in the beginning as well. If you go through all these stats, you will find hundreds of leaks, right? I also find hundreds of leaks. How do we prioritize that? And then how do we diagnose? What's the problem? How do we fix it, right? So there's more steps than just, hey, I'm a station. Okay, you shouldn't station anymore. Good luck. You probably tried that, right?
Yeah. I've had the post-it note on the monitor, like just fold river.
I love it.
But,
Post-it notes.
Yeah, easier said than done.
Yes, exactly, right. It's you're trying to manage symptoms and not fix the root cause. So this is something that actually we help you with. So, and you also arrive to the river actually already with a weaker range. That's even more concerning. So you're underfolding the river, which is in some spots actually is good. But in your game, as we will see in a second, it's more, I like to call it more emotional bluff catching than rational bluff catching. And like I said, it's an extra problem if I look at the amount of fast playing that you already did. And in some lines, some overfolding that you already did on an earlier street. So then to still fold at a very low percentage, yeah, that's a problem. Now, in some spots, actually, hero calling is good and very effective, and we want to continue doing that. But there's a specific area, you might already know it when you're in the big blind, maybe, and in position goes crazy. We probably have to hit that fold button a little bit more often.
Yep.
So that's actually something that, for example, if we go to, again, that note that I kind of suspected was your problem. If I look at river fold, we can see that you're folding 48 on the river. It should be 57. So you're folding flop normal, but taking consideration that you're already doing way more fast playing, right? And then you're underfolding turn, and then you're underfolding river again. Now, first the button, and that's why I actually have this breakdown. First the button, a wider range. It's generally when people have a wider range, it's easier for them to overbluff. So therefore, it can be too bad to be a station in a wide spot. That's kind of usually my motto, right? But especially also versus earlier position, big one versus early, for example, the fold 50 and big one for scholar fold 44. These are gonna be issues. These are not really going to be calls that are gonna make you money. And we can see here as well, your river call win is 36, where it should be 41. So your calls, they're not really performing. So that's actually a point of attention, but we will get back to that when we look at the river specifically. The next point where we can actually look at this, like a breakdown of, still we're at like an overview, right? General overview. I keep linking it already back to like specific spots. That's usually how I like to look at it. Because if you go straight only into specific spots, even with 150k sample, it's quite variance sensitive. Whereas I feel like just general flop turn overviews to kind of start getting information there, and then looking at the line itself to either conform or see, okay, well, if that's true, how would that look in this specific spot, for example? And then we can look at the hands, and then we can kind of find, link the two together in a way. Whereas if you would just look at, okay, single red spot in position, it's harder to find the pattern. Basically, I find these general overview tabs way more efficient. So this, like the last step in the overview, is kind of how you construct betting. We already talked briefly that before the call that you said that you changed some things. So we can actually see that your sizing scheme on flop, it's actually pretty GTO. So congrats there in terms of how often you bet 1/3, how often you bet 3/4, bigger, etc. We can see that your bluffing game is mainly like the overbets. You like to bluff there, and it's actually also very, very effective. We will get to that in a second as well, so I wouldn't necessarily change too much. This though is a point of attention. So if we look at versus bet sizing, we can see that specifically when people overbet, that's when you start to call more. What's going on there? It's supposed to be the opposite. When people bet less, you call more. When people bet bigger, you fold less. What's going on here then?
Well, it's because I'm always bluffing in the overbet, so therefore I just assume everyone else is. But
the classic projection.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, yeah, it's just definitely an element of it is just theoretical misunderstanding of the spots that, you know, you have to be okay with folding plenty of hands. Another level of it is the data. It does seem to say that when people bet big, they usually just have it. So I should just listen to that and fold it more. I think it's that situation where if somebody jams on me on the river, they're usually repping such a narrow range, and it's, you know, and maybe emotionally I just want to call to be cool, to have a fancy play, to be like, you know, this is, look at how I've owned the guy or whatever when he was repping a set and he actually had the pair that he's turned into a bluff. Like, those moments feel good. So there's probably a bit of just confirmation bias in the times that it's felt good to do that. But the reality is these are not good spots to station people down. So yeah, I think more and more is just going to be studying the hands where that happens and slowly integrate that, but also just listen to the data and not my feelings that I just want to call, you know.
Yeah, and again, like, this is very, very rational, right? Listen to the data and not my feelings. Whereas the problem is if you get into those situations, you don't have access to your rational thoughts. It's purely emotional. Your emotions take over. This is actually this part was actually one of the reasons why this program delayed a little bit. You know, like, we first had this tool and I said, okay, I don't want to just release this tool. Sure, I think it's better than what's out there on the market, but I want to really bring something that really helps people. So that's why I built kind of the course content around it. And then this part, diagnose and fix someone's leak, is like, oh, well, this is actually a little bit harder than I thought. So also I teamed up a lot with my co-host, Adam. Adam helped me a lot in this section as well, right? Because what you're describing, and this is how usually people like to fix it. Oh yeah, I'm going to just study the data again. Oh, indeed, the data sets that they're under bluffing. And then next time you're in the spot, you still press call. So it's not a knowledge mistake, you know, right? You know. So we cannot fix it with knowledge. Then how do we fix it, right? So it's usually either a focus or engagement mistake, or it's a mental game mistake. That's kind of the three areas that I kind of concluded in the end where we can make mistakes. We can make mistakes because there's a lack of knowledge. We can make a mistake because there's a lack of focus and engagement, right? We kind of know it. It's also not necessarily a mental game problem, but we're just not engaged enough to execute. Or it's simply a mental game problem. We know it. We know we shouldn't do it, but we keep on doing it. That part ended up taking a little bit longer to fix. But there, I think it's where the most value is. Especially in spots, to narrow this down, where people show continuous aggression, so think bet lines. And it kind of seems in line, right? When people bet bigger, so go over bet, or they show a lot of interest and aggression, that's when you have the urge to fight back the most. Now, I can already tell you, this is something that you can try to manage, or you can post as much post-it notes on your screen as possible. It's not gonna resolve like that. So yeah, in the League Buster program, for people listening, if you want to get rid of these mistakes, so the mistakes that you know that you have, and I've done so many database reviews and one-on-one coaching session, and I say, well, are you aware of this? Say, yeah, I know. And then I say, okay, yeah, well, then now what, right? So that's kind of the question that I wanted to answer, and I believe we did a good job. So especially, like I said, in continuous regression, if you look at your call win, so this is any spot where people do on the flop whatever, but on the turn they bet, and on the river they bet again. You can see that specifically, and then specifically again out of position, where you're only winning 35 where it should be winning 45. So again, like that big blind defense. That's, I think, like your main area where things go wrong. When you're in position, that's usually, for example, when you big blind versus small blind, aka the range is way wider, aka people bluff on average more. Therefore, calling down is actually not that bad. So it's not, and this is then something that also goes often wrong. Then people are like, okay, I should be less of a station. But you have to be very specific with the directions you give your mind. If you just tell your mind, I have to be less of a station, it starts to just randomly fold everywhere. No, there's certain spots where you actually want to be a station, and there's certain spots where you don't want to be a station, right? So it's their ability to process the information correctly and rationally and then make good in-game decisions. That's kind of what separates the best from the rest. Sure, they're better players, but it's just their ability to see spots as they are. Right? Whereas if you get into a spot like that, there's all types of things going on that have nothing to do with actually getting to the right conclusion in the hand, right? And that's kind of what separates the best from the rest. So yeah, this hero calling, definitely is going to be one of the bigger issues.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense, especially, and we saw before I was losing more to the early positions and losing as the 3-bet pot in position caller and things like that. It might be that I'm, these spots where players are tight, I'm particularly feeling like I need to call down, and these are not just a priori. These are strong ranges, and also just data wise, people tend to play in a strong, put their hands in their strong hands in the aggressive lines. So yeah, these are not good spots to call. But the blind first blind, when they have lots of hands available to bluff, and they just want to win the pot, then you can go ahead and station down. But,
or they just throw a little check bet line or bet check bet line, something along those lines. But those are usually the smaller pots, and that's kind of the thing with you probably, and many players have this. Their level of engagement is not the same. There's something about bigger pots, overbets, triple barrels, people putting a lot of aggression in you that turns something on. There's a consistent pattern here that you're gonna have to break, and you're gonna have to understand what's happening on a deeper level, right? You're gonna really have to understand, okay, what's going on physiologically, not only in my brain but also what's going on in my body, because that's in the end what takes over. Your body's taking over. You no longer have access to that part of your brain that knows the data says that this spot is under bluff. Because if you would have, you would not call, right? So yeah, I teach everyone, if you want to overcome this, I teach you exactly how to do it in the program. I just wanted to show that you can see, for example, if you make hero call. So this is any hero call versus sizing. Let's isolate that. So we already concluded, like, versus continuous aggression, the hero calls are not going that well, whereas versus broken aggression is actually not that bad. But if you look at your action profit, so this is all your hero calls on the river, where they went all in. You lost -7 big blinds. Big overbets, 2 samples. These overbets, you're losing -23 big blinds. The other overbets, -10 big blinds. Smaller overbets, -8 big blinds. These are a lot of big blinds. So if we can just fix this hero call leak on the river, you're saving a lot of money. So big upsizings, 12. And then 3/4 still -3. So hero calling still not going great. And then when we go lower, 60 to 70% pots, that's when you start to make money. Versus half pot, you're making money. Versus 1/3, you're making money. Versus very small, you're making money. It's like the perfect evidence is right here in terms of feedback, how you've been doing. So imagine we could just, actually I used to do this sometimes with one student of mine. I would go to his database and I would take out all the punts and then I would send it back to him and I said, what do you think of this graph? It's like, oh, it is amazing, great. Yeah, I just took off all your punts. So you don't have to, your problem is not strategically, you just have to stop punting, right? So that's kind of the same here. If you would not have made all these big hero calls, so in terms of helping to prioritize, what's your biggest priority? It's gonna be these river hero calls and really understanding what goes on that makes you make these calls, right? And this is not something like, oh, I give you a data point in MDA that that's a quick fix. There's no quick fix for this. That I can tell you. It's a process, but it's definitely fixable if you're willing to go down that route. So this is kind of it for kind of the general overview. The next point we then have is what everyone is used to is pre-flop. Actually, I already took a look at your pre-flop game. I would say not much to note here. Just quickly for the viewers, some points that are maybe different than what you're used to. We can see here how often, again, like from a performance perspective, so how often you made the raise, then how often you faced the 3-bet, and how often your steal was success, right? So you want to, in an ideal world, especially when you go wider, which you are going, like in the button and the small blind, you're stealing wider than you quote quote should. You want then there to be more success and less 3-bets. And we can see indeed on the button that you have 4% less 3-bets, and also 4% less success. So these two kind of balance each other out. But in general, if you make a looser button open, if you can see a flop, they make money. If you would filter now, go to a holder manager, you would filter bottom of your range, you open, and you didn't face a 3-bet, meaning that you got to realize at least a part of your equity, all these hands make money. So your wider button opens, they don't get high 3-bets. Keep doing those. You could even push it a little bit more if we fix some of the post-up stuff we talked about. Same with small blind. Small blind, you're getting more folds and less 3-bets, so you're already overdoing it. Keep on pounding on these spots and on the right players. Then we have like the versus open tap in terms of how often you're defending. There's a small bug here, actually, which is aware. We're now at version 1.6. 1.7 is already almost going out. So basically what we do is every month, based on also people that are in the Discord that use the program, like there's many stats, guys. It's almost impossible to have them all perfect straight away. So every month we kind of go through all the feedback and things that we found, and then we update them because we saw that these 3-bet success numbers, for example, it says 0. It's obviously not 0. So it's actually something that we already noticed. So that's on the list, and then next month we bring out the update so it's fixed. But in terms of like big blind defense, everything was perfectly fine. The only thing that I found, there was 1 point of attention pre-flop. If we look at the facing 3-bets, so this shows, again, performance, how often you face 3-bets, how often you're 4-betting, and how often the 4-bets are successful. And we can see that your 4-bet bluffs, they do well, 2% more than GTO. But specifically in position versus big blind, which is something actually that you're doing a lot, you're 4-bet bluffing quite a lot. But first big blind, this is something that you will see as well. It's just not very effective. So you're actually getting way less folds than you should first big blind, because on average it's the big blind 3-bet. People are just not polar enough, and they're just strong. It's just too easy, even though everyone knows. This is again is something everyone here knows it by now, right? But it's like every time it's just too easy to press the call button. It's a leak that everyone knows, but it's still not fixed. Why not? Because people don't know how to fix their leaks. They are aware of a leak, which is not the same as knowing. Knowing, I like to say, knowing is when awareness survives pressure, right? So you are aware that for example, the population underblows the river, but you don't know it because it doesn't survive the pressure of the moment, right? So we have to bridge the gap between becoming aware, which is what hand to node helps you with, to actually knowing. And that's kind of what we do with the Leak Buster program. We kind of close that gap. So like all your 4-bet bluffs all works fine. You're overdoing it versus the big blind, which is actually not incentivized. So again, like a deviation from theory, you're doing something too much. If the population is overfolding, great, keep on doing it. Like your button steals, small blind steals, right? You're doing it too much and it's very effective. But in this case, cut out 4-bet bluffing versus big blind, and then you're good. It's a very easy, easy practical thing. Like I said, other than that, your pre-flop game, very solid. Just, not much to add here.
Yeah,
any comments?
Pre-flop was something. Yeah, pre-flop was something that I put a good amount of time into. I made myself some charts and did some drilling and flashcards and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like at least my knowledge of the most common pre-flop spots in terms of GTO is pretty good. I would say above average for the pool from what I've seen, but I still need to be more flexible, right? And I think it's easy to be flexible in some ways, opening wider on the button, opening wider the small blind. That's like really fun because people don't 3-bet enough. But the flip side of that, as you say, is because they don't 3-bet enough, you have to actually overfold when they do 3-bet, and that's not as fun. So
it's again kind of the fight, just like with the facing overbets, facing barrels. When someone fights back, something gets triggered in you that you want to fight back more. Whereas how I approach poker, not to be narcissistic, but I think this is a very efficient way. Sun Tzu approved. You try to avoid what is strong and strike at what's weak. So in poker, basically your job is to identify when people are too strong. That's when you take a step back. And when people are too weak, you start pounding on them. Whereas a lot of people have this problem that they get triggered by people showing aggression, showing strength. and they want to fight that. And that's actually the opposite of what you should want to do.
Yep. For
so
sure. And I think
going,
it's also,
go ahead.
or sorry, I was just going to say for button versus big blind, for example, it's 4-bet bluffing is not even, it's something I studied, and it's something that I wasn't doing before, and it's something that a lot of people don't do. So it feels like it's a skillful play because I've spent time, learning what hands are good to do that with, and it feels like I should get to use that knowledge, but you only get to use it in the right situation against someone that's actually well studied. If someone's not well studied and they have a leak, the way to exploit that leak is just to take the boring play, and just fold. So that's something that I need to deal with as well, for sure.
I was going to say this is something actually that new school players or like newer generations kind of sometimes miss. But to be fair, I mean, you're not new, not old. I think you said 10 years. Like I've already been in poker, basically a dinosaur by now, like 18 years or something.
Yeah.
So in the past, for example, if you wanted to 4-bet bluff someone, you would look, okay, well, does he fold to 4-bet? Nowadays, people look at the hands, like which hands are used as a 4-bet bluff, but they miss the most important piece of information. Does the guy actually fold enough, or is it the clear spot where people don't have enough bluffs, which is step one? Then, if we have identified that, then GTO can help us identify what are the best candidates. But the most important thing is first to identify, well, is this actually a good spot to 4-bet bluff? And if it is, then we now know which hands would be optimal, right? So it's kind of, we messed up the order. So going to the next tab, like I said, pre-flop, not much to find there. This is just a general overview, broken down, flops, turns, basically just flops and turns. So we have offense, so that's when we do the betting, and then we have defense, so basically when we are defending. In general, your offense game seems fine. One thing to highlight, fellow donk better here, you could up it a little bit. 3.5%, GTO is at 4%. We can actually see the success. You're getting 6% overfolds, and you're facing a raise at the same frequency. So 6%. If I do my node locking math, you can probably stab 20% more on average if we just node lock this in our head. So hey, definitely keep on donking. On the turn, by the way, we see the same thing. I see you dunk 5%, should be 10%. So you're missing some donks here. You're getting 11% overfolds and 14% under raises so far. And in general, also, if I look at every database that I've seen, if I look at my own database, even at higher stakes, or if you just look at data, just something that's again good to overdo. So I cannot do a live without telling people to donk bet more, right? That would be unethical.
Of course.
So I'm happy to see brand. At least that you're somewhat in the camp. Makes me proud. Bet folding flops was another piece of attention. So if I look at fold versus raise, we can see here 42 instead of 36. Now we can look at, okay, well, where does it come from? After which sizing? After which hand class? If we look at the hand class, we can see weak draws, 49 instead of 34. So bet folding gut shots, for example, seems to be a problem. You're even bet folding good draws, 8.2 versus 2. So that's definitely a problem. And you're folding some middle pairs. So if I look at fold to raise, and let's look at, for example, a gut shot. You usually don't really want to fold gut shots, depending on if the SPR is low. But for example, this is a blind versus blind spot. We see bet, villain raises. This is in general, you don't want to fold a gut shot with an SPR like this. It's very, very rare. So that's definitely some point to pay attention to. Or we should maybe not bet the gut shot in the first place if we expect a lot of raises. So what's this? This is, for example, I find this actually a good example that I would much rather stab here with 5-6 no diamonds. Kind of my philosophy here is the hands that you're bet puking, that's the hands you want to check back. So this hand, for example, you stabbed the thing half pot and he check raises. You kind of puked, you folded, but probably not with, I mean, to be fair, I don't think this is actually a fold. He does go a bit bigger, but probably is not a fold. So again, this would be, but to kind of help with this, let's say, for example, if I expect to get check raised often, that's the first question, right? And this board, I think that's definitely the case. Low board, he probably does quite a lot of checking, and a check raise is a big part of the strategy. I would much rather just bet fold 6-4 offsuit, no diamond. So that's the hand that I would bet, and then I would check back 6-4 with a diamond. If I have 5-4 with a diamond, I would obviously bet that always, because I can always call a check raise. Doesn't matter which size he goes. So maybe something to take in consideration. But yeah, I don't think this hand is actually a fold, but that is a philosophy that you could use. So let me see. Yeah, so you're either betting a draw, like I said here on the 5-6, that you shouldn't be betting, or you should just call to the check raise. So the draws is definitely a problem, and I even saw you folded good draw, so I don't know what good draw would be. Draw. But I don't think we get to fold a good draw. Especially not at this SPR. This is a recreational, so maybe we get a ridiculously big sizing. No, but this definitely also a call. So you're folding.
Yeah.
You're folding draws where you simply shouldn't. So maybe you don't see good things happening. Where there's actually, a lot of good things that can happen. Now this one is quite big. And this could actually be a case of, yeah, so this one maybe this one is close, because I do expect quite a lot of folds, and you kind of block the main trap. But I do feel like I would much rather stab like King Jack here, and I would check back my Ace 9. I would bet A6. So this again would be the difference, right? If I have A6, I don't mind getting check raise, because I always call this hand specifically. I would much rather stab nothing than this gut shot, because getting check raise is just not nice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Or I could stab fold with, Queen 9 is 2 overs, but yeah, something like that where I'm a little bit less upset about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we also saw like some middle pairs. So this one would be a great example. You see, with 1/3, you face a check raise. I mean, he could check raise. This is a spot where, for example, in theory, he should be check raising 5-4, 7-6. So there's plenty of even worse and pocket 8s. Probably maybe check raise at a very low frequency. And I think maybe you're underestimating, but turning a 9, I know it's very infrequent, but turning a 9 could win you a stack, right? So if we just think about implied odds, you probably already there. So that would be.
I think this was probably one of those where my heuristic was something like I would call if I had a pair on the board, but if I have a pocket pair, I don't really like it as much, which is, it's true, but just in this situation where I've essentially range bet and then face a not huge check raise, you just have to be calling second pair or hands better than second pair.
Yeah. So for example, especially here, if you think about, for example, if you have 6s, well, then you're dead against 7s, right? 9s at least can still draw out against 7. So even if you see your hand as a draw, which in general I think is a good way to look at poker, just think about every hand in terms of drawing towards equity and the EV of that. While drawing towards the turn set or rivet set is pretty good money if he has the bottom set. So if we just add only that factor already in, we can actually make quite some money. We will just maximally lose, 5.5 big blinds more, and we could potentially win a stack. If you look at poker optimistically, like I do. Learning to look at poker optimistically is actually something that... and I pointed out this 8-9 as well. Just again, like he could raise 7-8. So he could even raise worse. So this is, definitely a point to pay attention to. So like these flop bet folds is something that I noticed. Other than that, but I also wanted to see, like, if you just have fold versus raise, you still don't really know, right? So this is where I hope I can see now the value that you straight away can see, okay, which hand class is causing the problem, right? So that's kind of where I think the value is of an extensive breakdown like this. Flop defense. I had something to note here as well. That in position, I saw an overfold, 35 versus 27. Again, then we can look at, for example, the hand class, mainly going to be like basically air. And then if I can tie it to a spot, that's, to go back to your big blind win rate, right? Single raise spot in position preflop caller. If you go to lines, we can see that versus a 1/3 c-bet, you're folding 34, where I should be folding 21. So that's 13% overfold, so quite significant. And again, here we can see that the air part. So you're folding hands that are air. So if we look at air, I mean, you're folding low pockets. Usually you don't really fold a one pair hand unless it's a bigger bet. So let me see. This is actually an unintuitive float, but I don't blame you for not floating this one. But this is actually an unintuitive float. It's a great hand to start bluffing with later. But this is not something that I would blame you for not finding. And where is a better example? This one, he's betting half pot. But first 1/3, for example, you would not fold this hand. First half pot, I would definitely fold it. But in general, like high cards, ace highs, definitely hands that you do not want to be folding, like this one. Definitely not a fold. Backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, overcard. This is a fine race candidate as well, I would say. Like the 3 is a great unblocker. You have good equity. Sometimes get called by worse. Think about hands like 10-8, Jack-8, Jack-10, King-Jack, King-10. So this is, for example, if I show you these hands, is there, for example, do you now know, looking at this, that this is not a fold?
Yeah. This one seems, especially given it's like with so many backdoors and the ace high overcard is just such a nice one to continue with. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And
This one's a
just
bit weird.
being aware of just when it's wide ranges and when it's small sizes, that this is when we get to battle. I'm battling in the wrong places, and I'm not battling enough here.
That's what I said about the emotional bluff catching. So it's like you get triggered by strength instead of triggered by weakness. So this is more of and this is kind of the next process, right? In terms of how do we diagnose? Well, we've identified that we're, for example, overfalling to the c-bets. Let's go through these hand classes and let's see, I didn't know I should be defending this hand. Great. Could be just a knowledge problem. You set up a drill in the solver, or you look at it, it's like, okay, now I know. And if tomorrow you go play, you might be able to execute it, no problem. But if you're like, no, actually, I know this should be defense, then apparently it's not a knowledge problem, right? Usually, like a flop defense spot like this is not necessarily a mental games problem. It's usually then more of a focus or engagement issue. You're just not caring enough, right? So how do we fix that? Well, that as well. I have answers to all these problems. So, but we first need to make the correct diagnose. And people usually only think about mistakes in terms of technical. Like, the solver said so, and they only try to solve poker with that part of their brain. It doesn't work like that. So the correct diagnose is very important. So this would be another one, ace 5. I would say this either raise or a call. We press fold. So this is definitely something to pay attention to. Usually quite like I said, an easy thing to fix. If it's probably like a bit, half of them will maybe be knowledge, right? Because it's quite a big overfold. So it cannot be only focus or engagement. So I would say half is probably just knowledge. So like maybe the deuces float that I showed you earlier on ace 10-9. Maybe that's one where like, what should I call that? I didn't know that. So that could be knowledge, for example. Sorry?
I was just going to say, it seems like blind versus blind particularly. This is one that I could use some drilling on.
So maybe, the blind versus blind float. This would be another great one. And like like the nice thing about this, because you need bluffs on an ace or a 10 or a 9. And the best bluffs are the ones that do the most unblocking, and that's always your lowest pairs. And they also have the most amount of equity. Think about looking poker through an optimistic lens. We can turn a set, man. We can river a set. That just like with the pocket nines. So that's kind of where
this is the thing. If you're facing a two big blind bet, it's like you turn the set 4 or 5% of the time, and then it's like, okay, so that means I need to win 20 times the money when I do hit, and it's like, can you win an extra 20 or whatever it works out to, 30 big blinds here? Probably. If they have ace king, ace queen, they probably, or whatever, like king queen, king jack, you probably get a stack. So it works out quite well. You need these asymmetric upside situations.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the points to pay attention to. We already talked about the missing races, right? So both scenarios actually with that ace 3 hand, for example, we could also raise. So you're missing the calls or the raises. We already talked about the flop check raise from the big blind. Definitely also a point to pay attention to. If I go to turn offense, we already talked about this the range construction, right? We already saw that the bet strong, bet weak, where actually we saw that in terms of success, you're very incentivized to do a lot of probing. So again, if we take the big blind note, for example, stabbing from the big blind facing a check back, definitely something we should be overdoing. So actually you want to kind of flip your current strategy. You want to trap more and bet more air. So you want to flip it around. That would be way more effective. Other than that, like I said, dunk more, always my motto as well. Other than that, not much to add there. Again, for the people looking, this is again just a breakdown. Sizings that you use. In terms of, like I said, in terms of sizings, you seem to be doing very well. Sizing scheme, flop, turn. When you're the offense game, like I said, from the offense game, I think just on the turn, there's this imbalance, but I think flop, for example, is fine. It's mainly when you face aggression. That's when there's more work to be done, and then specifically from the big blind. Yes, turn. So again, the defense problem. Let me take this away. Turn defense problem. So if we look at folding, you're actually under folding when you're out of position. Mainly, so this is mainly going to be when you're in the big blind, right? And you're over folding in position. I would much rather see this be the other way around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
But actually, looking at like face back in terms of your game, this is quite an interesting stat. So this is how often, when you call the turn, how often you face aggression on the river. So this is direct feedback from the hands that you played and the puts that you played, what people are doing against you. And actually, we can see that when you're out of position and you call the turn, you're going to actually face the aggression on the river 3% less than average. Now, this is actually not specifically versus you. This is actually a trend that I mainly see overall, and that's because kind of what you're doing. A lot of people, they play bet check with medium holdings. So what you usually see in just real games compared to GTO is that people's turn aggression is higher, and then on the river their aggression is lower. And then the opportunity there is then usually to overfold the turn to some degree, because yes, they're betting more and they're giving up the river, but they're betting more value hands that actually should be defending them. So the correct exploit is usually overfold versus the turn c-bet, and then over bluff versus the check back, or over attack the check back, right? If we think about that philosophy of avoid what is strong, well, what's strong? Their turn betting range. And if something is too strong, there's always something that's too weak, right? That's the whole idea if you come off balance. So that's actually, that's a point I wanted to add there as well. So actually maybe we can look at like some turn calls out of position, maybe also versus like some bigger sizings. Let me see, range, maybe a middle pair type of hand. What would be a good example? This is a 1/3 bet. This is blind versus blind. What is a good example of a hand that's quiet? Queen 8. This is usually danger when I see this board. Yeah, this one is definitely, I think, on the looser side. It is blind versus blind though, but usually when the board is this tree high connected, people have to do a bit more slow playing, and people, again, they like to leave their checking range unprotected and bet way too much ace X for already on the turn. This is just a general heuristic in poker. Anyone listening, any games that you're playing, people usually just strengthen their betting ranges. And you're kind of victim of that as well to some degree, right? Or guilty of that, I guess would be the better word. So in these spots then, and like I said, actually in this case it would be good that people don't float the pocket deuces because they would have turned a set. But they usually then lack like the pocket trees bluffs on the turn, stuff like that. And they kind of miss the ace deuce slow play on the turn, for example. And they just always bet them themselves. So yeah, definitely something to watch out for, like board textures that are sensitive to having that bias exaggerated like this, and also against spots, like probably if we look at like some big blind versus MP barreling, let me see, single raise spot opposition preflop caller, big blind versus early call weak. Well, it's always going to be low pair. Pocket sevens versus EP range. Oh, he checks back. Ah, that's first a small bet, that doesn't count. There we have a gut shot. Oh, he faced check back. Why do we keep on facing check backs? This one probably. Oh, we don't bet ourselves. Okay, then we check all the turn. I would probably just check fold the turn, unless you want to go fancy. Again, this is again one of these spots where people should protect their checking range, but they don't. They're just gonna always bet their value hands.
Yeah, it's the spot where the ranges are starting to tighten up. It's a turn bet now, and this early position ranges, like these are where we have to get a bit more honest. But when it's the big blind just versus a C bet, I need to be that's when I can be a bit wider. I should be calling more with the gut shots and the weaker pairs and things like that.
So this one I would probably already fold the flop and definitely fold the turn.
Yeah.
And definitely fold the river. So yeah, again, for like earlier positions, we just have to be a little bit careful. So this would, for example, be a great hand in the process that I explain how to basically fix this problem. This would, well, it all starts with the awareness, right? That's we've became aware, and now we have to start gathering evidence. Have to replay the event in our head. We have to write down our thoughts, write down our sensations. Yeah, this is a great piece of information that we can use to fix your leak, for example. All right, let's move to the river, and then after that we kind of are gonna wrap it up. But obviously not an unimportant street, the river. So we actually see that in general, when you see the river, your win rate is -10 instead of 42. So that's a problem. And like I said, it's mainly gonna be from making these hero calls. Like I think you're bluffing, your betting game yourself. It's not necessarily where the problem is. However, there is definitely some work. Now, your bet percentage is going to be quite high, but that's also because your bet percentage on the turn is going to be quite low. And one thing that I noticed in terms of your bluffing game, you seem to be over bluffing, but it's very like one-dimensional. You seem to have like one or two lines or sizings. That kind of what you like. We talked about that I think a bit before stream as well. Kind of called you like a one-trick pony. You have one line that you like to overdo or one sizing that you like to overdo, which can work very effectively and can actually be incentivized when you're playing, for example, lower stakes, let's say 100 NL, where the deviations are just bigger. But it's something, I would call it maybe a bad habit if you're trying to move up, where you just have to, need to add more tricks in your game. You have to be a bit more diverse in where you can show up with bluffs, because also people become better on average, right? They will still have leaks, but they become smaller, so therefore nuances start to add more. And the pools become smaller, so people pay a bit more attention to you. So then if they know your trick, then you're kind of lost. Then if I looked at check strong, actually I saw that you were value betting quite thin when you're in position, which means that so on the river your check strong is 14, should be 21. That means that your value betting hands that are just check back, so you're reopening the action. Usually this is not good if people punish you, but we can actually see that you faced a raise on the river in position 6%, but it should be 9%. So the way you punish people who value bet too thin is to not bluff catch, but turn those hands into a bluff. So it seems you're making a deviation. So just this stat alone, you'd say, hey, you have a leak, you shouldn't do that. But it's not something that gets exploited. It actually does not get exploited because it's 6% instead of 9. If they will get exploited, it's 12% instead of 9. But something to become aware of. Maybe your value betting hands that you just think are normal value bets. So maybe make an exploit without knowing it, right? That's obviously a problem. We deviations are great as long as they come from consciousness. So it can be just that you just have a bad habit of making thin value bets where you shouldn't. And like the river check out of position is something that we discussed, right? Moving the top of range to checking lines on the river when you're out of position and going for a check raise instead of betting yourself is a way that you can make extra money. Let me see. What else did I wanted to look at? So basically, for the people watching, this is just your river game broken down into all the lines that you can take, how successful certain lines are. So, for example, we can actually see that your continuous bet line that's actually underbluffed, and actually it gets underfolded as well by population. So you're getting 52% success where it should be 54. So people are overcalling. And that's again people who have already overfold flop and turn. So therefore they just arrive with a stronger range on the river. So actually you're underbluffing, but that's actually incentivized. And you're overbluffing, let's say, for example, a bet check bet line, and that's actually overfolded by 14%. So from that perspective, you're doing something very well. But like I said, it's more of a trick. You just keep on bet check bet bluffing. And for example, you miss bluffs in call check bet. That would, for example, be a line that I think you should definitely bluff more. Check bet, stuff like that. So it seems like your bluffing game is very one-dimensional, like a big sizing or a bet check bet, and that's basically it. There's definitely more spots where you can find good turn barrels and even triple barrels, but like I said, you do want to add a bit more nuance. But for example, out of position, your triple barrels are also getting good success. In general, bluffing when you're out of position, you can see that as well. You have 54% success, where it should be 42. And that's because out of position, you usually use more smaller sizings, right? So it's easier also for the in position to, so therefore the in position has to defend more, basically. Which actually brings me to the defense, because that's, I think, where, again, most of your money can be made. We can see that here. You're folding basically 45 everywhere. You just have like a fixed percentage, it seems like, and you don't pay attention to if it's out of position or in position. Whereas in position, like I said, you should fold 42. Out of position, you should fold 57. Now, I would say, especially on lower stakes, probably your fold percentage in position should be a bit higher because people use a bit less blocks. They play usually a bit more polarized. So obviously this is versus bots. So this is again something that I explain as well in the program at various spots. Certain benchmarks we have to take in consideration that they're playing GTO. So this would, for example, be a node where on average GTO just plays a lot more smaller sizings, and therefore we should fold less. And actually out of position, we should actually fold less because in position usually uses smaller sizings as well. So there's plenty of spots where population would throw out a 60, 80. So probably something similar that you do, where solver would just go jam or check, for example. So it's normal that the gap should be a little bit less, but obviously not. It should not be the same, right? As we concluded here.
Yeah.
And then actually we can see that your call win, for example, in position with hero calls, is actually going very well. And in general, we saw that in position, so let's say, for example, your big one for a small blind, it's fine to make hero calls, right? It's the out of position where there's the problem. So the big blind, and you're actually calling air way more often there, 56 instead of 38. So yeah, that's definitely a huge issue. We already saw the bet sizings, right, where we kind of saw the action profit based on bet sizing. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. But if we look at, for example, lines, you are in position, for example, you're overfolding versus a bet check bet, but you're underfolding versus a bet. So like, again, the line that's weaker, you're overfolding, and the line that's stronger, you're underfolding. So it's just like your mind gets drawn towards where the action is, right? So this is something that you're gonna have to address long term if you want to succeed in this game, because this is costing you a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me see. We talked about that, and then, like I said, mainly as caller out position. Yeah, that's kind of it for your overview. Any thoughts before we go to the final verdict?
I mean, there's a ton of great stuff here, and yeah, I really appreciate this. It's I did have that feeling as I was going through my year that there's something in my game that's not obviously showing up in terms of like the pre-flop stats or the c-bet sizings that's really hurting my win rate, because I see a lot of I study with other players, I have groups, and oftentimes I don't feel myself completely dwarfed by my friends' theoretical knowledge of the game, right? Like I feel like we're on a level par, but then they might have much higher win rates. So I felt like there was something big that I was missing. And yeah, it does seem to be in these. I'm just getting way too stationary in these like big pots against early positions in these like direct aggression lines. And yeah, as you say, it's not going to be an easy fix, but I'm really glad that I've got that awareness now that if I'm able to get my head around this is going to be this is thousands of dollars a year, right? This is
Yeah,
going to be
this
massive.
this is gonna be huge for you. So I'm gonna pull it up for the people, where I wrote down kind of the final verdict. In like also terms of kind of hierarchy. Like we already talked about river bluff catch game, mainly from the big blind defense. You already pointed out. I wrote down 2 emotional bluff catching, fighting versus strength instead of weakness. Overfolding in position versus small sizings and discontinued aggression, and then underfolding out of position versus bigger sizings and continuous aggression. So we all want to flip that around. So that's, like I said, in terms of making money, that's probably the most important thing. Then the next one is you're playing value, right? There's more to maximizing your value than just betting big and hoping someone calls. So as I said, playing mid-range too aggressively, betting for value while getting folds instead of bluff catching. So that would be that pocket tens example that we looked at. So that's the area where you're gonna up your blue line winnings. Not maximizing top of range, just betting yourself. So for example, small versus big blind, going for a c-bet check raise line instead. That would be a great way to build pots. Going for that delay versus check raise, or when you're on the river, bet turn, check raise river, or check call, or turn goes check, checking your check raise river from the big blind, stuff like that. Not enough slow playing in general on flop turn river. That was kind of my verdict. So these 2 points, like I said, in your game, we can see that you have theoretical knowledge of the game. You have a lot of experience in the game. You also said with your friends, you don't see a lot of difference. These 2 things I think are going to be huge for you in terms of if I can say what's going to contribute the most to your win rate. It's this. Upturn aggression with bluffs, and this was in general like that range construction difference, right? We wanted to move more of these 2 street value hands to turn checks and then bluff catch river to up your blue line. And your red line actually has to go up by adding way more bluffs in this spot, right? We don't necessarily have to go for the bet, right? But there's plenty of spots where turn bet is going to be already very profitable. For example, stabbing, delaying, barreling. And then I wrote down become less of a one-trick pony, just moving all hands to bet check bet and just only using the river over bet, for example, as a bluff. Or at least over bluffing just that specific one trick. So a bit more diversity there. Actually, we didn't really touch on this, but the 3-bet pots, I wrote down variance was definitely present, as we saw in the variance tab in the beginning. But you definitely have a tendency of doing this under aggressing and over folding quite a lot. This was actually one thing that I didn't point out. Let me quickly point that one out. But not huge in terms of something that you have to pay attention to. I will teach you guys how to prioritize correctly as well in the program, right? This is step 2. Step 1 is analyze. This is this step. Step 2 is how do we prioritize? And I didn't write down all the leaks, right? There's more, right? And this is completely normal, so don't go here in the chat, Dan sucks at poker. In the program itself, I go over my all my game, and then in the end, my conclusion is WAKko sucks at poker. Just like everyone else. Everyone sucks at poker. The job is suck less. It maybe sounds a bit wrong, but you understand what I mean. So yeah, poker game of mistakes. Make less mistakes of your opponents and you will win. You're actually over check calling flop versus c-bet. This is actually something that is very common for a population to do. But in these spots, let me see. Check call flop. Let me look at like some. Probably it's going to be like your low pocket pairs. And then like a king high board or something. Something like this. It's blind versus blind. Man. This, for example. Oh, this one is actually quite a big one as well. Yeah, this is already a fold on like a king deuce 3 board, for example. So when a board is king 3 deuce, pocket 7 is already straight away folding. So imagine if there's 2 broadways. These are just like spots where you have to just white flag it. Like he just has such a huge range advantage. High boards are just a matter of you get to massively overfold and he just gets to range bet, and from there we continue on playing. If you're trying to fuck with those ranges, not where the money is. Again, kind of identifying where the ranges are strong, right? Like if you think about this 3-bet range, especially people who go linear, don't have a flattening range, they have all the broadways. Like this is kind of best case scenario. You're up against ace queen or like an ace 5 or something, right?
And this still has I don't even know.
It has equity and it has the range advantage equity wise, so it's going to put a lot of pressure on boards that are favorable for him. So you're just not getting these hands to showdown enough. So this is actually quite a big league as well. However, the spot 3-bet pots out of position PV color is not very frequent, so I wouldn't necessarily pay a lot of attention or put a lot of conscious effort into that. Where is the sheet? Dan database review right here. Fast playing too much, bluffing too little with raises, kind of, right? That we already concluded that was here as well. And the fast playing, right? The fast playing, I showed you that pocket 5s or pocket 7s on this. What was it? Queen 9-5 in position 3-bet pot.
Yeah.
Smaller spots that I pointed out: reduced 4-bet bluffing versus big blind. The overfolding versus small c-bet. This is actually, the overfold was quite significant, and the spot is decently frequent. Yeah. And this is a very easy fix. So in terms of also how to prioritize, we have to take in consideration how hard is it to fix something. So like reduce 4-bet bluffing versus big blind doesn't really seem that hard to fix, in my opinion, right? So it's something that we can easily tweak. This one is a little bit harder. So the spot is, it's a single raise spot. It is a flop spot, so a bit more frequent. Not really sure where I would rate this one. Probably somewhere in the middle in terms of how important it is. Finding more bluffs raises for a small c-bet. It kind of goes hand in hand. So your game versus the small c-bet. Flop fold versus raise. We talked about that, right? With these gut shots, I think we looked at the 5-6 as a good example. And in terms of variance, also something that I take to look at. It is, you are running not the great. So if the heat picks up a little bit, and you fix at least these 2 issues, and then maybe some small things like the 4-bet bluffing and the floating versus c-bet, man, 3BB, 4BB, 100, definitely very realistic. And to give people an idea, or at least over the sample, right now it was 0. We can definitely get it to at least something like that. Probably even higher, because these 2 they cost you quite a lot of money. So hard to give an exact number, but I'm optimistic. So and this is just something that I wrote on. Like I said, there's definitely more. And we can sit here all night and tomorrow as well, and we can continue, right? It's just a matter how deep you want to go. In the new League Buster program, I give you the tools and knowledge on how to do it yourself. And this is, I think a lot of people, they know the value of database analysis. I went to ChatGPT. I said, what does a database analysis for online poker cost? It gave me a ballpark estimate. It said for a typical online poker player doing a serious database review, something like 50 to 200k hands, which is what we did, right? 150k hands. Good coach. I'll give myself some credit here. Live feedback. Well, I gave you live feedback. You're likely looking at around $250 to $800 as a common range, depending on how extensive the review is, how qualified the coach, so kind of the stakes that he plays and the experience that he has. So let's say this was worth roughly somewhere in the middle, $400 or $500. Let's say that's kind of what you can look at in terms of cost. And with the League Buster, I basically give you the tool to do it, and I teach you to do it yourself. So people often then go to a coach, right? But the problem is, I'm doing this now with Dan, and then let's say this session would cost Dan normally $500. 3 months from now, Dan will have to call me again and say, hey, Wakko, we have to do another session. And then the next quarter, we have to do another session. And then he's already, before I know it, at the end of the year, he spent $2,000 on database reviews. Way more ideal if I would just show you, right? And teach you how to do it yourself. So that's kind of what we did with the Leak Buster program. If I go to the site. So here, if you go to the link, let me put the link here in the chat. All the information that you need is right here. You go to Let's Fucking Go because obviously you're interested. So for 1K, that's basically the cost of 2 of these sessions. I teach you exactly how to do it yourself. Let me get this correctly on screen. I teach you exactly how to do it yourself. I teach you how to fix these actual leak, right? Because then is now like, okay, I became aware of my biggest win rate booster is indeed this problem on the river, but how do I fix it? This is something that I'll explain you in the program. I think actually if I go back to the site, I can give, if we go scroll down, there's an overview. It is, so here we have the whole analyze section. So I will show you exactly how I do it through my own database. Actually, let me quickly log in. That's maybe easier so I can give you guys a better overview of how this looks. Sign in. All right, so if I log in, we're here, and I go to the Leak Buster. I explain you, like I said, step by step. It's something that I like to call the feedback loop. So we can find the feedback loop here. And analyze is only the first part of, and that's kind of what we did, right? So now we have to prioritize because we saw that we have a lot of leaks. Then we have to diagnose and redesign. We have to come up with the real reason why that problem exists, and we have to come up with a fix. Then we have to start training and internalizing the new way to do things. And game time, this is all about what we do pre-session, what we do to increase our performance during the session. Like Dan already pointed out, yeah, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but then in session, everything goes wrong, right? So that's kind of what I discuss in game time. How do we set ourselves up so we can actually do the improved thing? Evaluate, monitor, I think I already touched on this a little bit. Obviously, the main difference here between monitoring something and a complete analysis is kind of the sample size, right? So are we actually doing what we set out to do? So I teach you exactly how to do this yourself. And then we repeat. And repeat is because in the end, the loop never ends because mastery never ends, right? There is no stagnation in poker. You either go forward, you grow, or you go in decline because the rest is always improving, right? So if you're not proving, it's not like, oh, like, no, I'm not going to do anything on my game and you just stay there. No, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, this basically the next step would be prioritize for Dan. I already gave him a little bit of help. These first 2 points I know is where the real money is going to be. And then has to go through this section, the diagnose and redesign. And especially for the river section, I think from what I can tell, this is clearly a mental game issue. So that's kind of what I will cover actually in this video. We will talk about the fear and we will talk about biases. We will talk about, but we keep it very practical and around the goal here is to fix the leak, right? There's plenty of mental game content out there, and it's like, yeah, this is all very cool, but it doesn't apply. And this one is strictly straight away applies to your leaks, and I teach you exactly what to do and how to fix it. So it's not just rambling around, oh, you have a fear of failure and therefore you, no, we turn it into action points. All right. And then it's going to find the efficient way to train it, internalize it, game time, like I said, what you do pre-session, and we will kind of link everything. Again, pre-session is not just, and this is how mainly people do it. I think I wrote it literally here. It's not a checklist or to-do list. Pre-prep isn't about listing everything you should or shouldn't do. So no, and this is what Dan said with the post-it notes, stop doing this, stop doing that, right? That's usually how we like to approach pre-session, but it's about creating and entering the zone where those things happen naturally. So this is a very big mindset shift. So again, I kind of want to show this because I feel like there's kind of people have experience with, oh yeah, pre-session mental game performance coaching, but this is very practical. And we every time link it back to the leaks, for example, in this case that I found when I walked through my game. So basically everything that you now saw with Dan, that's something that I did with my own game. Okay, so I definitely also, if you want to exploit me, I'll also share all my leagues in this video. And at some point, I think at the conclusion, I believe it was, as you can see, just what I did with Dan, I also did for myself, wrote down a lot of leaks. And I think it was somewhere in the end that I came to the conclusion that this was the conclusion. TheWakko sucks at poker. That's that was my conclusion. Just like we came to the conclusion that Dan sucks at poker, and anyone who would come up to this YouTube channel, we all suck at poker, guys. But luckily, we don't have to be perfect, right? Poker is a game of mistake. Make less mistakes than your opponent, and you will win. Also, in terms of like a little deep bust in terms of beliefs, what it takes to become a good professional poker player, right? People think that you need some sort of talent or some luck or I don't know, money, whatever, but you need a systematic approach to getting better. That's literally what sets people apart. And basically this program, I did my best to create a step-by-step approach. You just follow this approach. I give you all the tools, all the knowledge that you need in order to improve as a poker player, and find and fix leaks in your game for good, right? How to work on your game. So yeah, that's kind of it for me. Dan, anything you would like to, any final words from your side?
No, nothing major. I just want to express my thanks to you and to the team. This is obviously a really useful tool and useful framework for thinking about how to get better at poker. The key for me is that nothing in poker is particularly in terms of improving at poker. None of it is particularly hard in terms of like brain surgery is hard or
brain surgery
is hard
yeah.
or something like that. But it's hard. It's not hard to do, but it's hard over the long term, and it's hard to stick with it, stay consistent, do the things that really make a difference in your game. And when you have a process that you can just like every day wake up, I'm following it. These are my 3 leaks. These are how I work on them. This is my warm up routine. If you have all those things in place, it makes improving at poker become a lot easier, a lot more automatic because the process is already there. You don't have to think about how am I structuring my study plan every single day. So yeah,
and it makes poker a lot more fun. Actually, this is actually something that I share in I think introduction. At some point, I think I share like how I kind of came to this, and at my story somewhere in the beginning, I actually share one of the sessions I did with Elliot Rowe for a long time ago, but super effective. And basically, it showed me that there's 2 roads to poker. You can kind of grind it out, or you can try to become the best. And he kind of switched me that normally you think that trying to become the best is actually harder, but it actually isn't, because that process, if you do it well, kind of what I explained in the program, that process is actually something that gives you a lot of energy, and it actually makes poker super enjoyable. It's way easier to become engaged and play well and be curious, and you will just enjoy yourself way more. All right. So yeah, definitely I put a lot of my passion into this little product. So definitely go check it out, Leak Buster. You can find here the link somewhere down below in the chat. I want to thank Dan for coming on. It definitely takes some courage to have your database reviewed live on YouTube for thousands of people to watch. Like I said, guys, Dan said in the beginning he has a master class, a master plan, right? This is just advertisement. Now he's going to do exactly the opposite. So for Dan, this was a good investment.
This is an advertisement. Everyone come and bluff me now. You know I'm going to call, right? Guarantee it.
Yeah, he says, he's like, okay, there's 2 ways that I can fix my problem of stationing on the river. I can either fix it, but that's hard and I'm not really sure how to do it. Or I go on the TheWakko stream, show everyone I'm a station, and then tell them I'm not going to do it anymore, and they're going to bluff me, so I can actually just keep on calling.
Easy game.
Man.
Easy game.
And then you said this is less complicated than brain surgery. I don't believe it. So trying to become the best is what we're doing in the mechanics. Yes, the mechanics of poker is showing you the mechanics behind poker success and trying to become the best player that you can be, for sure. All right. Well, then I wanna thank you, man, for sharing it. I wanna thank everyone who showed up live. If you showed up in the replay, let me know in the comments down below how you like it. Give this video a thumbs up. Share it with people who you think might have similar issues, right? Stationing the river, or it's either the other camp. It's two camps. Either you're stationing or you're always overfolding. That's like the main two big issues that people have. And I will show you exactly